living. I don't do this anymore. I do real work. Just kidding, just kidding. I was an engineer before I was a pastor. Okay, so, a lot of people, certainly at our church, we know Pastor Cherie, but what has she been doing all these 40 years, right? So I'm just going to give a quick, as quick as I can go, because 40 years is a long time, rundown of where her life has been. Okay? So, okay, why is that not working? Let's try that again.
I don't want to see her pulling that drum set out.
Okay, right. So as Larry said, this is what she told me. The first thing out of her mouth when she met Pastor Leggio was, "The Bible is garbage and should be thrown in the trash." Just like that. She didn't say it nice. And so that was where she was at. She was a diehard atheist, and you couldn't convince her otherwise. But the love of God through that pastor is what opened her heart to the Lord. And at 18 years old, she got saved. She got saved, I thought it was in Hudson County Park, because they used to run park services. Some churches used to do that. They ran services in the park. I guess that's where you first went. But maybe you got saved in the church. I don't remember where you got saved. Okay, anyway, so it was at a park service where she first really heard the gospel. Okay? Within a year after her salvation, she knew she was called. Come on now. And that man in the picture is Nunzio Leggio. And that's the coffee house that Larry referred to called his place. And she was an active worker in that coffee house. When she got saved, she told me, when she felt called to ministry, she told me she went to the pastor and said, I feel like God is calling me. And he said, okay. And she said, but you don't understand, I'm a woman. Because, of course, back then, that was not as common. And the pastor said, it's okay, God knows. And so he was an amazing, I had known him briefly myself, one of the greatest men of God I've ever met in my life. He worked in a hearing aid company for years. He used to say how his factory gave hearing aids to Queen Victoria, and Queen Victoria got saved. But he then went into the ministry, and he was just, they wanted him to work in the district office because he was so good at that stuff, but he said, no, I'm called, and it was an inner city church, similar to here, only that building was not as big at all. Okay? After she was called, let's see if this will work quicker, she went on to Zion Bible. Who is that person? Yeah. She went on to Zion Bible College, which is now North Point in Rhode Island. North Point, Massachusetts. It used to be in Rhode Island. At the college, as is required, she was involved in many different ministries. One of the things she did was go to the projects and I think run evangelism things at the projects, door to door. She was in the choir. She was a children's church teacher. She was very involved in the missions groups because at that time she thought she was called to be a missionary. And so she's the one in the center. As you can see, she's the only female in all the men on the bottom picture. She was part of a prayer group. Your yearbook said for North Africa, but I thought it was Asia, but that's what your yearbook said. And she was the head of the missionary council for the school. So at that time, she really felt called to missions, and that's where a lot of her heart was. Then she did graduate. There she is again, and she was a double major with pastoral and Christian education. Amen. From there, she went to North Central Bible College, which is now called North Central University. And she told me that when it was 10 degrees, they would joke that it was a heat wave. No joke. When it was 10 degrees, they really thought, oh, thank God it's warm today. Minnesota is very, very cold. But she was very comfortable there because she was from the city, and North Central is right in the heart of the city. So she said she felt comfortable because she could see the neon lights outside her dorm room window. Okay? At that time also, she did do some summer work to the Philippines. Because as we told you, she felt called to be missions. She was head of the Far East prayer team. And then when she graduated, she was a triple major. Whoever thought Pastor Cherie was so smart? Wow. She was a triple major with pastoral, Christian education, and missions education. And she was the only woman to graduate with pastoral that year. And that's
Praise the Lord.
after that, she did go to the mission field. She went to the Philippines, and she was also in the Philippines working with Teen Challenge, and she also was in Guam working with the United States naval personnel that was there. From there, she came home from the mission field and took a youth pastoring job in a little tiny town called Bessemer, Pennsylvania. Population 1,100. It was like everybody knew each other, you know? And she was there for a not too long period of time, and we won't say why, because sometimes all pastors are not godly. And I'll just say that. We are very blessed here. We have a wonderful senior pastor. But unfortunately, in the ministry, pastors are people, and they don't always follow Jesus. And when that happens and you have a position with them, it is a very bad situation. And unfortunately for Pastor Cherie, that's happened more than once. And so she wasn't there very long. She did not receive a salary there as well. It was a very small church. A lot of times it's tough for small churches to pay people. From there, she went to Calvary Temple in Wayne. And we know Calvary Temple here. This was quite a long time ago. It's not the same Calvary Temple. As a matter of fact, this was before they had their mega church that they have today. She was the minister of Christian education there, and what that does, and this is what I understand that to do, is she decides and determines all the curriculum for both the adults and the children of the church. So basically, she's in charge of all the education for the church, for Christian education. So she was there, and then, bear with me, at that place she did finally receive a salary, $75 a week, which is less than $4,000 a year. But, you know, when you're passionate for Jesus and called to the ministry, it's not about the money, obviously. It's never about the money. If it's about the money, then we're in the wrong business, that's for sure. Then she went back to West New York Assembly to do youth pastoring, to help them out there. And I think this is what Larry was talking about when they wanted to bring her on staff, and it didn't work out. Pastor Cherie was saved in that church and was very rough around the edges. You know, like she gave testimony one time, and here was her testimony. She said, well, I know God is working in my life because now I don't carry a knife this big anymore, I only carry a knife this big. So, you know, she was not your genteel, quiet individual. She was a tough woman. But she comes from a background of tremendous amount of abuse in all ways, and she's a living testimony. I love when people say, abuse? I thought she grew up in a Christian home. That is the power of God in a person's life. Okay. Also, while, you know, throughout her time there, she would do children's crusades, similar to VBS, but different in that she would write the program, different skits, puppets, singing, etc. She plays the auto harp. Hasn't done that in a long time, but she does. And you know, so she would sing and whatnot, and you know, do puppets. Matter of fact, we recognize that one. I certainly do. Okay. Then from that point on, once I believe, you know, she knew that the church was not going to be hiring her, she moved to Pennsylvania. And she went back to school to get her first master's degree. And she got her master's degree from Drew University. She was living, even though she lived in Pennsylvania, she commuted to Drew, which is in Madison, New Jersey. And she got her first master's in, I'm trying to think if I can even see that, Master's of Theological Studies. Okay. From there, she went on to volunteer work. Well, not really volunteer. She worked at the Assembly of God Church in Bangor, which is where she currently lives. But at that time, it was like a house. It was a very tiny church. But I'll tell you, when she started the church, there were 7 adults. That she had over 35 children in her children's ministry in that church when she worked in that church. She became the associate pastor there, And it was in the middle of the heart of the city again, the city of Bangor. Bangor's near Allentown, even though Bangor people don't think it's a city. Bangor is just like Allentown, just more rural. That's really the only difference. And so she had quite a number of children. They come from everywhere, just running into the church for that program that she ran there. So she was the associate pastor there, and also was going to school and received her second master's at Evangelical School of Theology, where she got her Master's of Arts in Religion. At Drew, she graduated magna cum laude, I should say that, for people who are into that kind of stuff. That really just says Pastor Cherie's smart. That's all that really says. Even though she's very humble, everyone who knows her, you would never guess that she's so educated. And I don't mean that's because she acts stupid. I just mean that there's a lot of humility here. And you know what I'm saying? She's so educated, I don't get it wrong. But there's a lot of humility there, and I appreciate that about her very much, her humility. Okay, and then finally, the district where she came from was extremely prejudiced against women. She had one district official say, well, if you marry a pastor, we'll ordain you. Now, today the assemblies has changed all of that. There are actual, thank you, Jesus is right, there are actual criteria for how to become certified, licensed, and ordained, so that there's no more prejudice allowed to dictate the call of God on somebody's life. Okay? So she finally, after quite some time, got ordained. And this was a big deal in her life. This was a huge deal. It happened to be the 75th anniversary of the Assemblies of God, so we went all the way out to Erie, Pennsylvania, which is in the uppermost corner of the state, and so she couldn't invite any of her family, and that was very disappointing to her. So at that time, Pastor Leggio was still alive, but he was very sick. And so I asked him, he wanted to come, but he couldn't do it. He had a heart attack, and he wasn't in good shape. So I asked him to make a little tape. Back then we had little tapes. So will you make a tape for her, and I'll bring it, and then she can hear you there, and then it'll be like you're there. And he did that, and that was a great blessing for her. This was a big deal time. Her mother came, and the family who knows her mother, that was a very unusual situation. Because Pastor Cherie's mom was a little crazy and very different. And I drove out there, and I'll tell you, she was very different. Okay, but she got saved and is in heaven today. So the ordination was a big deal. When she found out that Pastor Leggio was so ill, we came back from that ordination, and she started working again to help him. She went back home to West New York Assembly to help him. She became the youth pastor there. Because as a senior pastor, you know, you can't do things, it's very burdensome. You want things done, but when you can't, what do? So even though there were factions in the church, the Lord sent her, and that was part of her own feelings of, I owe this man because he saved my life. I'll tell you, I don't see much of that anymore today. I don't. But that was her heart. This man is dying. He's very sick. I'm going to go back. I'm going to help him. And she did not receive any money, but because she lived in Pennsylvania, it was a 150-mile round trip. And she did that twice a week at least. Okay? So that speaks of just dedication, total commitment to Jesus. See, it's not about, ministry is not about, hey, look at me, I want money. Ministry is about, I owe you everything, Jesus, what can I do for you? And so she had great appreciation for Pastor Leggio. Because she was rough around the edges, he was very patient with her and helped her grow and believed in her. Even when she went to Bible schools, there were still men there who had a real problem with women in ministry, even though that particular Bible school was founded by a woman. There's always prejudice everywhere for everything. And so he was a constant source of support and encouragement for her. And she knew that. And so she wanted to give back. And so this was just one of the ways she did that. Get back together. He did die a year later, and she stayed with the church an entire year to help them in that transition till they found a new pastor, made sure he was good, fine, he had everything he needed, and then she left. So, and you know, I'm saying these things, and I know I'm embarrassing you. I'm saying these things because Christianity is all about character and quality and passion for Jesus. It isn't about, I just go to church. Oh, look, I have my Bible. It's the nuts and bolts of life. And I've known this woman a long time. She lives and breathes it. There's no phony baloney here. Lives and breathes it, and I appreciate that about her very much. From there, once that period of her life ended, she, 40 years is a long time, just trying to keep straight. Okay, I made a mistake. I think this is when she went to Christian Life in Stroudsburg, but before that, when she first moved to Pennsylvania, she actually attended Central Assembly, which is less than 5 miles from here. And she was a volunteer there doing puppet ministry, working in junior church, etc. And that's when I think she was also going to school. Throughout her life, she has had other jobs to help, help her income because, as a staff pastor, there's not a whole lot of money unless you go to a mega church. And even our smaller churches, pastors don't always make much. So as a staff pastor, youth pastor, children's pastor, there's not much money. And so when she did volunteer work in the churches, she always had other jobs, which I'll talk a little bit about later. From there, she was just praying about where to go, and somebody had recommended her to a local church, a Methodist church in Bangor. And one day the pastor showed up in the driveway. I remember this because I was down working on something, and she was doing some gardening, and the pastor showed up, Milton, and he said they needed a children's pastor. Would she come? And she called the district to make sure it was okay for her to work outside of the assemblies, and they said yes because they felt it was like a mission field. And off she went. Surprise to her, it was not a children's pastor position, it was a youth pastor position. And so that was a little bit different. But while she was there, youth pastors do strange things. I was looking at some of my old pictures, and I thought, oh my gosh, thank God that just doesn't show up on Facebook. Try to have some dignity. There is no dignity in youth pastoring at all. Okay? So, but when she was there, she saw that they were missing a lot of ministry. So she worked into the Christian education area. She worked into the children's ministry area. So she became like a minister of Christian education, the children's pastor, and the youth pastor. And this is where she met Brigham. Okay? She was there for 12 years, and there's a lot of ministry that goes on in that, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a ton of ministry, and you're very, very busy. Okay? I think she made $12,000 a year. Then I was a youth pastor at the time also, and I had gone to Pittsburgh Invasion. The invasions were, things that the assemblies did out in Pittsburgh, whatever. And she got the idea, hey, we can do an invasion here in Bangor. And so what she did is she organized an allies group of all youth pastors in the area from all different denominations to get together and say, hey, man, let's get our kids together and do community service. And so I think she did this for 9 years. I couldn't remember. I was only involved about 3 or 4 years with my kids. But basically, we did everything. We worked in nursing homes. We cut grass for the elderly. One group of kids carried firewood into somebody's house because he liked to keep it in his basement. I mean, just any odd job that we could do, we would advertise, we would do. And so I don't even remember how many kids came. I know I had at least 20 in my group that would come and do invasion for a week. And it was a great time. It was a great bonding time for the kids to see other kids in other churches, like being Christians and doing other things, etc. So it was really great. After 12 years, she left there and became a Bible teacher for 7th through 12th grade at Faith Christian School, which is a local Christian school in Bangor. And that was a lot of work, but I'll tell you, Pastor Cherie had, because of course she has no money, there's never been health insurance, except for 3 times in her life. Now she's on Medicare because she's old, she said. Okay, praise God for Medicare and Medicaid, just saying. Okay, but she had health insurance only 3 times in her entire life, and each time she needed a major procedure done. So do you see how God provided for her? See, God called her into ministry. He knew she wouldn't make much money in order to do what she called him to do, but he's going to take care of her because that's our God, right? And so each time, and this last time, most of you know she had 2 discs removed from her neck because she's got a lot of problems in her spine, spinal stenosis, blah, 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 arthritis, etc. So she had 2 discs removed, and she worked here and had amazing insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and she had everything paid for. And we're talking major Lords. Yeah, that was the Lord. So God provided for her again. At this point, she started attending the local, the Assembly of God Church in Bangor, and got involved in their local in-town ministry. They called it the Hub. So she got involved in their children's program,